Hello, Frizzle fiends! The I Hunt Killers books are my new obsession. There are 3 books in this trilogy, and I rated all 3 of them 5 stars. You know how rare that is for me? Even in some of my favorite series and books of all time, I don't rate every single book 5 stars. But you know what? This series did it. And now I am absolutely delighted to explain to you why you should read this book. Which is why we are going to start out with a spoiler-free section. So first, what are these books about? We follow Jasper, called Jazz by his friends. You know, he's just your average 17-year-old teen in a small town. He's got a best friend, a girlfriend. He's pretty good in classes. He's got a crazy grandma. And also his dad is like the worst serial killer ever. So Jazz had what you might call one of the worst childhoods ever, with his dad trying to brainwash and mold him into becoming the ultimate serial killer. But now, in this series, his dad's been in jail for a few years, and he's starting to get back on his feet. And then, when a series of suspicious deaths start happening in his small town, he decides that he should use all of this knowledge about serial killing he has in his head to try to help catch the killer. And then the series spirals out of control from there in the most clever way. Now, Jazz's backstory is intriguing. This is a really easy book series to pitch, but I also want to say that one of the things I really love about this series is that his backstory never feels so overpowering. Like, yeah, his childhood learning the ins and outs of killing people is really important to who his character is, but the more important parts of this story is always what he's going through in this moment. It's him trying to catch this killer. It's him trying to have a better relationship with his current girlfriend. Even though Jazz has such a big past that this book could explore with flashbacks and lots of delving into it, it's honestly very restrained, and we just get the sprinkles of it that we need in order to understand the plot that's happening now. Is this book fast-paced, whirlwind thriller? For some parts, but it takes just as much time to establish the emotional moments for the characters. And that's another thing that I love about this book, is that it balances plot and character, like, perfectly. You've got the plot. It's a mystery. We're trying to catch a serial killer. There are very high stakes to the danger in this book. But we also have the character development where Jazz is terrified that he isn't going to be able to avoid becoming a serial killer. He's got all the knowledge and talent he needs to kill people and get away with it. And he was also trained by his dad to think like a serial killer. And when you have a background like that, who knows if you might snap? So we've got this nice psychological puzzle of Jazz fighting against his instincts and upbringing and genetics. And we also have a thriller mystery of trying to find the killer. What more could you want? Let's talk about the characters. I've already gone over Jazz. He is desperate to catch killers and very relatable in that desperation. You can feel his emotion and drive and understand exactly why this matters so much to him. But the side characters in these books are also fantastic. In the first book, we only have Jazz's point of view. But in the later books, we get to expand into other characters' point of views, which is really fun and I think done just the right amount. So let's talk about some of the main side characters of these stories. We have G. Williams, the sheriff and father figure. If there was ever a character who really needed a healthy father figure, it would be our main character, Jazz, and he's got one! How delightful! Does Jazz always listen to and follow the advice of G. Williams? No. But you get it when he doesn't. In the end, he is a rebellious teenage boy. But G. Williams has his own things that he's working through. He was the police officer that finally caught Jazz's dad, the notoriously evil and prolific serial killer. And that was really psychologically hard on him. That was a case that shook him to his core. And now he's trying to fight for Jazz because he doesn't want Jazz to have to go down that road too. But also, when you need an adult to come to the rescue, he's there. Love that character. We also have the best friend, Howie. Howie, in the beginning, is just Mr. Comic Relief. A little bit of a doofus, just kind of tagging along on all these adventures Jazz is going on. But the more I got to know Howie, the more I realized how incredibly dependable he was. Yes, he cracks ridiculous and sometimes inappropriate jokes. But also, he's your best friend that's willing to break the law for you. He's the best friend that has your back both emotionally and logistically. And then we have Connie, Jazz's girlfriend. Ultra competent, and you know, she does put up with a lot of Jazz's crap. He's got some emotional and psychological issues, but she also doesn't take crap from him. You know, it's the perfect balance. She's exactly the friend that Jazz needs to get him through all this, while also still being her own character and person, with her own wants, desires, and drives. Connie's the type of character to make wild, over-the-top declarations and ultimatums to manipulate people to get what she wants, and it's usually pretty successful, because she's a good actress and a good liar. And she can see through other people's manipulations pretty well as well. Now, there were some sections of book 2 where I didn't like Connie as much, because she made a few very questionable decisions, but I do understand why she made them, and I don't think they're necessarily out of character, so it's fine. And then there's the character that is looming over everything in the background of Jazz's father, Billy. He's right over there, like one town over in jail. Maybe doing nothing, maybe pulling strings, but definitely the memory of him is pulling strings. That he has left so many people, Jazz and other people in the town, emotionally scarred. Even when he's not present or doing anything, he's still present and doing things. And all this build up to him being kind of like this unbeatable monster in the background is so worth it when we actually get to meet him in person and the confrontation is raw and epic. And you know, it was all worth it because this is like our big villain of the series. Even if he's not the killer that they're actively hunting down here or running from here, he's still the person who put everything in motion by raising Jazz. Wonderful character work all across the board. Now, lest you think that this is only a YA thriller mystery thing, let me talk to you a little bit about the literary elements. Now, we already have the psychological character development, check. But we also have shockingly poignant allusions to the Crucible, you know, the play about the Salem witch trials. At the local high school, they're putting on the play and our characters are participating in it as actors, the Crucible. And so allusions to this play and lines and scenes from it are being called back to throughout the entire series, like a little cultural touchstone. And you know what? It works really well, because the events do parallel the events in these books. Where you've got a murder spree to the people involved might seem like it has an internal logic, but from the outside is really just a tragic murder spree. You've got people wrestling with great guilt and ulterior motives, etc., and disaster coming from it. I'm not usually the lover of highbrow literary references in my books, because oftentimes I feel like it's just shoved in there and doesn't really add anything to the story that's being told here. But I do think all the references to the Crucible totally add things to these books, and give you another lens to look at all of the events of this book from. And it's especially meaningful because it's meaningful to our characters, because it's one of the things that they're using as a lens to look at their situation through. And now I need to gush about the various conclusions and endings to these books because wow, they're fantastic. So we're shifting into all the spoilers time from here until the end where I'm going to compare this book to the book I Am Not a Serial Killer by Dan Wells because they have a lot of resemblances and I love them both and I would like to compare and contrast them for the people who are interested in that. Use the timestamp chapters if you want to jump around. So at the end of book 1, Jazz, flushed with triumph from catching the killer, gets the words "I hunt killers" tattooed on his chest. And I get that that's the title of the book, but when I got to that moment, I was like, is that really what he chose? Because throughout these books, he has a mantra that he's repeating to himself that, like, people matter. To try to not become, you know, a killer. And it would make so much more sense for him to tattoo that on his chest, but the declaration, "I hunt killers," just felt a little, what? But that's how I felt about it at the end of book 1. But then throughout books 2 and 3, I warmed up to it. Because Jazz does not go out and hunt a lot of killers immediately after getting this tattoo. He actually kind of stagnates. And so whenever he sees this tattoo, it's like a guilty thing for him that he made this declaration to himself, to the universe, that he's going to hunt the killers, and then he didn't actually do it. And does that mean he's really cut out for this? And does that mean that in the end he might actually be a serial killer himself if he's not cut out for hunting serial killers? And it becomes part of his emotional turmoil. So it paid off in the end, and I am glad how that turned out. So for books 2 and 3, there is this mystery where there is somewhere the king of the serial killers, that there is a serial killer organization, that they're somehow organized, and there's someone who is the top dog. And we get lots of red herrings of who it might be, and of course you assume that it's going to be Jazz's father, but then we get some hints that it's not him. And then the book lays out different clues and wants us to think that it's Billy's sister. But in the end, it's Jazz's mom, who he thought was dead for many years. Jazz's mom turns out to be a serial killer herself, with no love for Jazz at all. And this mystery was not laid out the best. I totally saw it coming over a book before the reveal happened. So if we were just judging this book on how well it set up this mystery, not very mysterious in the end, a little too obvious, too many clues. But if we were judging this book on how narratively satisfying the moment is when Jazz finally figures out that his mom is like the king of all the serial killers, A+. Because Jazz has a complete emotional breakdown over this, and yes, that is exactly the realistic response to hearing this news. Especially because the book has been playing with these themes that Jazz's mother must have been a good influence on him because obviously his father wasn't. That Jazz's mother must have been the one good thing of his childhood. And then, plot twist, she was actually a further bad thing of his childhood. It's like, how does he even cope with this information? He was holding on to the fact that his mother was a good person, was a victim, because that could make him a good person and a victim who was also in this situation of being close to his father. And then when it turns out she's neither a good person nor a victim, well, what does that make Jazz? And the emotionally complex discussions that came with this reveal were so worth it. Were so good. It doesn't even matter that the mystery wasn't laid out perfectly, because the emotional buildup and payoff of this moment was done perfectly. I rest my case. And then in the end, Jazz's character arc ends so triumphantly as he chooses not to kill either of his parents, even though he's in a self-defense battle of the death with both of them, proving to himself and to the world that he's not a killer. The thing that he's been worried about and wrestling with for these entire books. Because if there was ever a moment where killing someone was justified, a serial killer on the rampage might just be it. A serial killer on the rampage who is actively trying to murder you at the time? Yeah, I'm pretty sure almost everyone in the world would agree that would be a justified time to kill someone. But Jazz doesn't. He finds ways around it. And then through that act, he's also able to finally find some closure through all of this. Part of me wants more books in this series, but the larger part of me is so satisfied with the ending to this trilogy, and I never want it to be touched again. Though I would read more books if the author wrote one, just saying. Every book in this series is 5 stars for me. And I highly recommend picking up the series if it sounds like something you would be interested in. And now, let's compare this book to I Am Not a Serial Killer. Now, the premise of these two books is ridiculously similar. Teenage boy with serial killer tendencies, check. Small town, check. Serial killer comes to his town, check. He takes it upon himself to catch this killer for the cops, yes. He gets over his head real quick, yes. YA, yes. Terrifying, sometimes yes. Now, I enjoyed the 𝐼𝐴𝐻𝐻𝐾illers books more than the I Am Not a Serial Killer books. Why is that? There's a few reasons. Now, don't get me wrong, I love both of them. But I would say the 𝐼𝐴𝐻𝐾illers series is a 5-star series, and the I Am Not a Serial Killer series is a 4-star series. You know, just for me though. You could like the other one more. But I would definitely recommend both series to lovers of both series. If you love one, you're probably gonna love the other. But 𝐼𝐴𝐻𝐾illers is a little bit more focused on friendship, is a little bit more focused on the side characters, and has a little bit more of a fun Scooby and the Gang kind of feel to it. While I Am Not a Serial Killer is more horror, both psychologically and supernaturally. Where I Am Not a Serial Killer is wrestling even more with the questions of what does it mean to be a psychopath, etc. And I would also say that the I Am Not a Serial Killer books got less good as they went on. Like, all of them are good, but the last 3 books I didn't enjoy as much as the first 3 books. Whereas the 𝐼𝐴𝐻𝐾illers books only got better for me, which definitely places them higher in my book. But please, if you've read both of these series, let me know what you think of them, because I need to discuss these books with someone. And if you made it to the end of the video, put a knife emoji in the comments to let me know that you're here. Subscribe for more videos on Frizzle Fridays, and thank you for watching.